So we're at the point where we realize that the argument the spies made against being able to go to Israel wasn't just simply because they thought the Canaanites were strong people and they had a bigger army and we wouldn't be able to vanquish them, because as Kalev very clearly illustrates, that's not a factor. When Hashem is on your side, doesn't matter how big the enemy on the other side is, it's irrelevant. It's absolutely irrelevant. Because whatever scenario you think of, Hashem has another infinite amount of scenarios, that can resolve things. So meaning to say, even when you see a very big, frightening threat, Hashem can still find ways, to people moved out of the way just at the right time, whatever it is. So after that, the spies say, yeah, but you don't understand. When we're describing who's in Israel, we're not just describing Canaanite nations with powerful armies. There's also Nephilim. And these Nephilim, they don't belong to our world. They are the descendants of fallen angels, and they've actually been around. They survived the flood. That means that they survived Hashem's retribution. So there is a reason to be afraid of them. Because if they're so powerful that even Hashem, when he destroyed the whole world, didn't, or as they want to put it, was unable to destroy them, then how on earth do you think that we're going to destroy them? And that's why Rashi told us, not only are they the descendants of angels, but they go back to the generation of Enosh, because that's really important information, because that tells us that they survived the flood. So that's an illustration that they seem to be immune even to Hashem's retribution. It also explains why Rashi gives us the names of those two original angels, Shamchazoy and Azazel. Because what they wanted to illustrate is, we know in Judaism that the name of something always tells you what that particular thing is all about. Then the name captures the essence of something. So the name Shamchazoy, the word Shamchazoy, in fact, it's not only Rashi who says this is brought in other sources as well. It comes from the word Shimamon, which is destruction. In other words, it's an angel who's named for destruction. And Azael comes from the word Az, which means powerful, illustrating that these are very powerful forces, not just ordinary powerful forces, but they're negative forces. They're forces of destruction. So how on earth do you, the spies say, how on earth do you think that we're going to be able to vanquish and overcome these individuals, these forces, these Nephilim? And of course they were wrong. And of course they get punished as a result of that, and the entire nation who buys into their narrative gets banned from going into Israel. We understand that. But we need to understand maybe a little deeper what exactly is their problem, the spies, and why they bring up this issue of these big, powerful, angelic, supernatural creatures. And what's really the problem? I mean, if you think about it, these are hand-picked leaders of the tribes. They're not schleppers. First of all, Moshe chooses them. And I'm pretty sure you could rely on the fact that Moshe knew who to choose. Second of all, the Torah calls them the heads of Israel. That tells you that they are endorsed. These are not, they're not pushovers. Rashi tells us that at the time that the spies went on their mission, originally when they set out on their mission, they were still kosher. Obviously, because Moshe would never have selected people if they were not kosher. So, if you analyze what's happening over here, you must be talking about people who are very intelligent, very learned, very spiritual. Do you honestly think that they just had this lapse of faith and they forgot about the miracles that they had seen only weeks earlier? The exodus from Egypt, the 10 plagues, the splitting the sea, the routing of Amalek, the presentation of the Torah at Sinai, the manna that they were living with. Honestly, what kind of fickle people do you think these are? Maybe us. We could get easily rattled. It reminds me a lot of during the Gulf War, when the Rebbe repeatedly said that Israel is the safest place on earth, and that firstly the Jewish world and specifically Israeli society have nothing to worry about. And the Rebbe's view was even that there was no value in handing out the gas masks that they distributed at the time, because it would actually just cause more panic than good. So the first night that there was a Scud attack from Iraq on Israel, nobody knew what to do because the Rebbe had said the safest place. And the early visuals that were coming through, it wasn't like today when everybody could share things on social media. You had to wait until it was reported on the news. So the early visuals that were coming through showed massive destruction to property, massive. And the people just made the assumption that there was naturally massive loss of life. They didn't have the same network of shelters in Israel that they have now. I mean, Israel's always had bomb shelters, but not like now where a person has a mamad in every apartment. It wasn't like that. So the story goes that one of the Rebbe's secretaries, nobody wanted to say anything to the Rebbe, like, you promised us it's going to be the safest place, whatever. So one of the secretaries took a radio and put it on the radio, the radio on the Rebbe's desk. And the news was playing, that there was this attack in Tel Aviv and so much damage, and the estimation was the loss of life, etc. The Rebbe walked into his office, the radio sitting on his desk playing the news, and he turned off the radio and he said, I still retain my view. And afterwards, of course, it emerged that despite the massive damage to property, there was no loss of life and there were very minimal injuries. So for us, we forget these things. We forget that miracles happen, and we forget that the Torah tells us that Hashem looks after Israel in a very unique way that is not the same as other places on earth. We forget that. But here you're talking about people who are the spiritual giants of the time, and they're getting worried about the physical giants in Israel. It doesn't seem to add up. So we really need to appreciate where they're coming from. Now, one of the things that the spies said was they called it Eretz Ocheles Yoshveahi, that Israel is a land, or at that time was called Canaan, is a land that eats its inhabitants. It's a very unusual way to talk. Eretz Ocheles Yoshveahi. It's a land that eats up its inhabitants. No, that doesn't seem to align with the rest of what they're saying. Like when you say that they have very strong armies in fortified cities, which they said, that makes sense. But what do you mean the earth, what's it, like a cannibalistic, like human-eating earth? Like, what did they mean? So the big issue that these guys had was not despite their spiritual stature, it was because of their spiritual stature. That was really the problem. Because think about it this way. If you lived in that time, you lived in the desert, you wouldn't have all the issues that we have today. The massive Prozac industry, the massive therapy industry. We wouldn't have any of those things, because what was the stress? What did they have to worry about? Literally. They literally had nothing to worry about. Wherever they went, they were protected by the clouds. The clouds did not only protect them from enemies, they also protected them from the creatures that live in the desert, the snakes, the scorpions, protected them from the weather. So even though they were exposed, they should have been exposed to the most harsh climate, inside the environment of the clouds, it was completely temperate, comfortable, they didn't have to worry. As they traveled, so we're told that Hashem literally smoothed the path in front of them, so they didn't have to worry about obstacles and hills, like when you walk to shul, So there's some walks that the walk to shul is comfortable, but the walk back is torture, and some it's the other way, They didn't have this problem. It's nice, smooth, straight. They didn't have to worry about one of the greatest stresses that we have, which is earning a living. It wasn't an issue. They didn't have it. Can you imagine living your entire life, people 40 years in the desert, never once had to worry about finances. Never. Didn't have to worry about taxes. Didn't have to worry about making ends meet. Didn't have to worry about anything, because everything was provided for them. Not only that, not only was everything provided, but we know that the manna, the way in which it was provided, was that it could emulate any kind of food that you wanted. So every night you're eating in a 5-star Michelin restaurant somewhere else in the world. Okay, tonight we're going to have Asian. Not that they knew what these things were, right? I don't know what kind of delicacies were available in those days, But whatever it was, you could just have the experience of whatever kind of food it was every single day with the manna that you ate. Not only that, much more importantly, for 40 years, okay, at this point they hadn't been in the desert for 40 years, and at this point, when the spies are dispatched, the plan is not to be in the desert for 40 years. They've only been in the desert for about a year. So in that time, it's not like they were schlepping every day to a new location. They stayed for extended periods in certain locations. Like the first part of their journey was a lot of movement to get out of Egypt. And then the last part of the journey, there's a lot of movement to get to Israel. But in the middle, there's not a whole lot of movement. So it's not like you're being schlepped and you're living this idyllic lifestyle, completely immune to any of the world's tsuris. So for all you know, I mean, nobody thinks about it this way. For all you know, the Jews are living in their little cloud area at the same time that some neighboring country's got a plague of locusts or a drought or a famine. And they wouldn't even like it didn't touch them, didn't bother them. They didn't even know the news. They're just living in their own little space. But much more importantly than that, when you ate manna, we all know that it's a bit of a cliche. You are what you eat, right? But we do know that there's certain foods that have different effects on the body. So, for example, people tell you that you've got to have the omega-3 fish, fatty fish, because that's brain food, right? And by contrast, there are other foods that make you a little bit more sluggish, not so healthy, clog the arteries, etc. When you eat manna, the nature of manna, besides the fact that it satisfied a person physically, that they ate a small portion but it felt as if they'd eaten a whole meal. Besides that, we're told that the only people who had the real ability to plumb the depths of the Torah were people who had been eating that diet of manna, because it was spiritual food, so it opened your mind in a unique way. Because you're eating food that's prepared in God's kitchen, so whatever you eat just like opens your eyes and it expands your brain. So their experience of Torah was unlike anything that we've ever imagined, and for that matter, even in the generations of the sages of the Talmud, etc. Like they just didn't have the experience that these people had. Plus, over and above that, the teacher who's guiding them through this process is the very best teacher ever in history. So imagine every single day you go to Moshe's shir. Not like this, you come in the morning to this shir. You go to Moshe's shir. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how brilliant that shir was? Can you imagine every single day you were getting brand new insight, and it was mind-blowing every single day. And then over and above that, in the center of the whole camp, you've got the Mishkan, where Hashem is speaking on a constant basis to the Jewish people, and where you can see the divine presence. Who wants to leave that? So the spies go to Israel. They're not fools. They understand, on their analysis of Israel, that the minute we're going to cross the Jordan River, no more clouds, no more manna, no more Moshe. Okay, at this point they didn't know that Moshe wasn't going to be with them. So, okay, maybe they'll save Moshe. No more stress-free living. Right? The minute you walk into that land, you've got to become farmers. And these people had zero experience as farmers. Right? The older generation had been slaves in Egypt. Their children, who later are going to become the ones who enter the land, how do you learn how to farm if you're in the desert? They're going to have no experience. They're going to realize that Israel is in an arid climate. So if you want to be a farmer, you have to anticipate that there are going to be dry spells. Plus, Israel, as we well know, still till today, lives in a pretty rough neighborhood. So you're going to have, every couple of years, some insurgency from some nation. And read ancient Jewish history, it's exactly what happens. If it's not the Philistines, who probably were the most consistent insurgents, then it was the Moabites or the Assyrians or the Babylonians. Like every 5 minutes somebody's attacking you. And in all of that, you've got to try and earn a living. Where are you going to have the luxury of time to invest in your spiritual development? So these guys come back and they say, we don't want to go into Israel. We'd rather stay put and have the most incredible spiritual experience without the distractions. To illustrate their point, they say, the land is going to eat you up. Meaning to say, because you have to be involved in the land, that's going to eat you up. It's going to drain you. It's going to stress you. It's going to distract you. It's not going to allow you the time or the energy or the focus to be able to do all these wonderful spiritual things that we're doing currently right now. The earthiness of this type of life is going to override the spiritual aspirations that we have. They come back and they tell this to the Jewish people. And because the Jewish people are also spiritually sensitive people, not like everybody thinks that the ancient Israelites were some kind of primitive group of people who were complaining every 5 minutes about something. Every one of those complaints came from a position of insight and of spiritual awareness. So they're also spiritually aware people. They hear these guys come back. They say, you're our leaders. You are the standard, like the gold standard of what a Jewish person should be. And you're coming back to tell us, don't do it. We're on board. We don't want to do it. We don't want to lose our connection. We don't want to become overwhelmed by the stuff of life. So everybody gets on the bandwagon with them and says, we can't go into Israel. So Kalev gets up and he tells them, what are you talking about? Even if Hashem, as Rashi tells us, even if Hashem would instruct us to build ladders to climb up to the heavens, we'd build ladders to climb to the heavens. In other words, even in the land that you can't imagine has the opportunity for spirituality, even in that land you can make a ladder to heaven. You don't have to sit in this protected environment. Basically what Kalev is telling them is, stop thinking of yourselves as weak. Because if you believe that the only path to Hashem is in a protected environment, then you're basically saying you don't have a way to connect to Hashem. You need Hashem to make the space for you. Let's go into Israel and we'll become productive citizens. Not sitting there passively waiting for the manna to fall from heaven. We'll become the people who produce the food. We'll become the people who build the country. We'll be the people who build our relationship with Hashem. And you know what Kalev says? Not only will we build a relationship with Hashem, we'll build a deeper relationship in that environment than what we're doing here. Because here, quite frankly, we're doing nothing. Everything is handed to us on a platter. Everything is easy. We're living in a spiritually protected environment. We are not yet players in Hashem's business. When we go into the land, we cross into the Jordan, then we're going to actually step up. So people hear them, they think, oh, you know what? Kalev, you actually have a good point, because really, if you think about it, isn't that why we were given the Torah at Sinai, so that we should be able to do mitzvahs? And by the way, if you have a look through the list of what the 613 mitzvahs are, there's a whole lot of them that you cannot do living inside the clouds in the desert. Right? You can't give the tithes, and you can't do the Shemitah, and you can't do all of the laws around not grafting different types of produce, or about giving the tithe. Okay, it's another type of tithe. Bringing bikurim, all these things, you can't do them. So the spies realize now they're in trouble, right? Because he's got a very powerful point, that at the end of the day, the goal of Judaism can only be realized if you're living in normal life, and you're actually having a little bit of stress, and you're fighting against the distractions, and you're trying to balance your responsibilities with your spirituality. So now the spies are about to, they're about to be shown up. So they say, but you don't understand. Have you ever heard of the story of the fallen angels? The story of the fallen angels, you'll all agree that angels are more powerful than we are. You'll all agree that they are more naturally aligned with what Hashem wants than we are. And you got these angels who said to Hashem, we want the opportunity to experience Torah and mitzvahs on earth. Not in the desert, surrounded by clouds. On earth. Like have the human experience. And they came down to earth. These powerful angels, listen to their names. Their names indicate power. Shem Chazoi has the power to destroy. Azael comes with the power of strength. They came into this world and they couldn't do it. They couldn't hack it. Such incredibly advanced spiritual beings. They couldn't hack it. And they fell. And not only did they fall, but as Rashi told us originally, the first time we came across the Nephilim in the first parasha of the Torah, not only did they fall, they caused the world to fall. So you tell me, say the spies, if such advanced spiritual beings could not make it, do you honestly think we could? Your ideal is great in theory. Go into the land and live up to the standards of Torah. It's all great in theory, but is it practical? And at that point, the nation falls to pieces, and everybody latches on to what they've said, that ultimately, if a powerful spiritual being cannot withstand the temptation and the stress of living on earth, we for sure can't, and they say, we don't want to go to the land. Now, the end of the story, everybody believes, is that Hashem punishes them, right? Hashem says, right, that's it. None of you are going into the land. But in context, it's not absolutely punishment, because basically what Hashem is saying, if that's what you want, that's what you're going to get. And when he tells them you're going to remain in the desert for 40 years and eventually die out in the desert, never have the opportunity to enter the land of Israel, he's effectively telling them, I'm giving you exactly what you've asked for. It's only now I'm giving it to you with the knowledge that it's not the right approach. And that's the element of punishment. Yehoshua and Kalev, who were very focused on the fact that whatever Hashem says we can do, they get into the land, as well as the women, by the way, who did not participate in this whole revolution, and obviously the children who were too young to participate. What's the take-home message? Very strong message. If something is in the Torah as a responsibility for us, it's absolutely natural. We'll have 1,000,001 reasons why we think we cannot achieve it. This particular mitzvah, not for me. Another mitzvah I could do, but this particular mitzvah, I've tried my whole life, I can't do it, it's beyond me. So the message over here is, if Hashem tells us that there's a particular land to conquer, if Hashem tells us that there's a particular area of our lives, of our spiritual development to conquer, that in itself is a guarantee that we can do it. So we can't take the attitude of the spies to say, well, maybe not me, because that actually is a rejection of Hashem. We have to be aware of the fact that if the Torah tells us to do X, that means we've been given the resources to do X, whatever that mitzvah might be. And when we take that attitude and we recognize that Hashem would never ask us to do something that He's not empowered us to do, then our whole spirituality changes. And we don't walk around, blaming or excusing, because we say, if Hashem told me I could do it, I could do it. So please God, we should all get into our own promised lands.